Willow House stood at the edge of a dense forest, a relic from the 1800s, its once grand architecture now marred by time. Ivy crept up the sides, and the front porch sagged under the weight of years. Rumors of ghosts had long haunted the townsfolk, tales of a tragic family that vanished without a trace. But for Jamie, a curious college student, it was the perfect place for a weekend getaway, a chance to escape the pressures of finals and explore a piece of history. As Jamie pulled into the gravel driveway, a chill crept into the air, causing him to shudder involuntarily. He had heard the stories but dismissed them as local folklore. Yet, as he stepped out of his car, the oppressive silence of the woods enveloped him. The only sound was the rustle of leaves, whispering secrets that made his skin crawl. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the adventure ahead. Once inside, the house greeted him with a musty odor and dim lighting. Dust motes floated in the slants of light that broke through the heavy drapes. The wooden floors creaked under his weight, echoing like distant footsteps. Jamie set down his backpack in the living room, where faded portraits hung crookedly on the walls, their subjects' eyes seemingly following him. A shiver ran down his spine as he glanced at a particularly stern-looking woman in an ornate gown. As evening fell, Jamie decided to explore. He wandered through the narrow hallways, the air growing colder with each step. Shadows danced along the walls, creating the illusion of movement, but Jamie chalked it up to his imagination. In the kitchen, he discovered an old, dusty table set for dinner, plates and silverware arranged as if waiting for long-gone guests. A feeling of unease gnawed at him. The house felt alive, pulsating with an unseen energy. He retreated to the living room, pulling out his laptop to distract himself with work. Just as he began to type, a soft sound interrupted him, a faint melody, like a lullaby, wafting through the air. Heart racing, Jamie glanced around, expecting to see someone, but he was alone. The melody grew louder, laced with a sadness that filled him with an inexplicable dread. He tried to shake it off, convincing himself it was a draft or the house settling. That night, as Jamie lay in bed, the lullaby played again, echoing in his mind. Suddenly, the sound of soft footsteps echoed outside his door. Panic surged through him. He was alone, right? Gathering his courage, he crept to the door and opened it a crack. The hallway lay in shadows, and a faint glow flickered at the far end, where an old lantern hung. Compelled by curiosity and fear, Jamie moved toward the light. As he approached, he saw a figure, a young girl in a tattered white dress, her long hair cascading down her back. She turned toward him, her eyes wide and pleading. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing like a breeze. Jamie's heart raced. He was frozen in place. "Please, they're still here." In that moment, the air grew heavy, and a cold gust swept through the hallway, extinguishing the lantern's light. Jamie stumbled back, his heart pounding like a drum. He could feel the weight of despair hanging in the air. He turned to flee but found the path back to his room shrouded in darkness, the shadows closing in around him. Desperate, Jamie dashed into the living room, slamming the door behind him. The air was thick with tension, and he could hear the faint sobbing of the girl echoing in his mind. The shadows seemed to pulse, and he felt an overwhelming sense of loss. It was as if the very walls of Willow House held onto the pain of the family that had once lived there. As he searched for a way out, he spotted a dusty journal on the mantel. With trembling hands, he opened it, revealing pages filled with entries from the girl, Clara. She wrote of her family's struggles, the dark figure that loomed over them, and the night they disappeared. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on him, urging him to understand their plight. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, breaking his concentration. Adrenaline coursing through him, Jamie crept toward the sound, heart racing. In the dim light, he saw the kitchen table overturned, dishes scattered like broken dreams. Standing amidst the chaos was a shadowy figure, its form shifting and indistinct. "Leave," it growled, a voice that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. Feeling trapped, Jamie took a step back. The memory of Clara's plea flooded his mind, and he knew he had a choice. He could flee and abandon them, or he could confront the darkness that held them captive. "Why are you doing this?" Jamie shouted, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure paused, its shape flickering like a candle in the wind. "They cannot leave. I cannot let them go." The voice was filled with pain and rage, echoing through the walls. Jamie remembered Clara's words about a dark force that had consumed her family. "You're not alone," he called out. "You can let go." The figure hesitated, and for a moment, Jamie saw the outlines of the family, trapped in sorrow. The sobbing of the girl filled the room, and Jamie felt the weight of their collective anguish. "Help me help you," he pleaded. In that moment, a warmth enveloped him, a surge of hope piercing through the despair. The shadows began to recede, and the girl appeared beside him, her face radiant with light. "You can set us free," she said, her voice echoing softly. With a deep breath, Jamie stepped forward, reaching out toward the dark figure. "Let them go," he shouted, his voice steady and resolute. As if in response, the darkness roared, swirling around him, but Jamie stood firm, the light of the girl guiding him. Slowly, the shadows began to dissolve, the oppressive weight lifting from the house. A chorus of whispers filled the air, gratitude mingled with sorrow as the spirits of the family finally began to fade into the light. As dawn broke over Willow House, Jamie found himself sitting on the porch, the air fresh and alive. The once ominous house now stood in quiet dignity, free from the burdens of its past. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. In the following days, Jamie penned a story that told of the family's plight, the ghosts of Willow House, and their ultimate release. He left the town with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of purpose, knowing he had not only uncovered a piece of history, but had also helped free a family from their sorrowful past. The echoes of Willow House would forever linger in his memory, a reminder of the power of compassion and the enduring connection between the living and the dead. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. As Jamie drove away from Willow House, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The house stood silent and still, as if it were finally at peace. He felt a mix of relief and lingering unease, as if the echoes of the past still hung in the air. The stories he had heard and the visions he had seen would stay with him, weaving their way into his writing and his life. Back at college, Jamie found it hard to concentrate on his classes. His mind was filled with thoughts of Clara and her family. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching over him, guiding him somehow. Inspired by his experience, he decided to write a book about the haunting, a blend of fiction and the truths he had uncovered. He spent hours in the library, researching local legends, ghost stories, and the history of Willow House. Days turned into weeks, and as Jamie delved deeper into his research, he uncovered more about the tragic fate of Clara's family. The town archives revealed that the family had been caught in a storm one fateful night, and a tragic accident had claimed their lives. Clara had been the youngest, and her story tugged at Jamie's heart. He felt an unshakable connection to her, as if she had chosen him to be her voice. One afternoon, while sifting through dusty old records, Jamie stumbled upon a journal entry from the family patriarch. It detailed his desperation, the fear of losing his loved ones, and an ominous reference to a dark figure that had been haunting them for years. Jamie's pulse quickened as he read. Could this figure still linger, even after the family's release? As he poured himself into his writing, Jamie began to experience strange occurrences. Late at night, when he was deep in thought, he would hear soft whispers echoing through his dorm. The sounds were reminiscent of the lullaby that had haunted him in Willow House. At first, he brushed it off as stress-induced hallucinations. But soon, the whispers became clearer, often calling his name, pulling him from his thoughts. One evening, while working late, Jamie felt an icy breeze sweep through his room, causing the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. He looked up, and for a brief moment, he swore he saw Clara's figure standing in the corner, her face illuminated by the glow of his desk lamp. He blinked, and she was gone. Heart racing, he tried to convince himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. After a restless night filled with fragmented dreams of Clara and her family, Jamie decided he had to return to Willow House. He needed closure not just for himself but for Clara, who seemed to still be reaching out to him. The idea of facing the house again filled him with both excitement and dread. Would he find answers, or would the dark figure still linger, threatening the peace that had been restored? Driving back, the familiar landscape unfolded around him, but the atmosphere felt different, charged with an energy that made him both anxious and hopeful. As he approached the house, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the porch. Jamie parked and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders. Inside, the air was still, yet it felt alive with the whispers of the past. He wandered through the rooms, each step echoing with memories. The living room, where he had first encountered Clara, felt different, brighter, somehow. He set up his laptop on the old table, determined to write not just the story of the family, but to reach out to them to make sense of what had happened. As he began typing, the whispers returned, more pronounced this time. "Help us. Remember." They swirled around him, urging him to listen. Jamie's heart raced, and he paused, closing his eyes to focus on the sounds. It felt as though the house itself was guiding him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, breaking his concentration. Jamie's breath hitched in his throat. The noise felt deliberate, as if something or someone was trying to get his attention. Mustering his courage, he moved toward the kitchen, the air thick with tension. What he found left him speechless. The table was set once again, just as it had been on his first visit, but now the plates were filled with food. Steam rose from a pot on the stove, and the sweet smell of apple pie filled the air. "Clara," he called, his voice trembling. "Is that you?" There was no response, but he felt a rush of energy, a warmth that wrapped around him. He stepped closer, overwhelmed by a sense of nostalgia and longing. He reached out to touch the table, feeling a connection to the family that had once filled this space with life. Just then, the room grew cold, and Jamie's heart raced. The dark figure from his previous visit emerged from the shadows, its form more defined this time, swirling with an angry energy. It seemed to grow larger, feeding off Jamie's fear. "Leave this place," it bellowed, the voice reverberating through the walls. Jamie stood frozen, fear gripping him tightly. Clara's presence flickered beside him, a soft glow against the encroaching darkness. "You can't take them away," she whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the chaos around them. "We are free now." With a surge of determination, Jamie stepped forward, his heart pounding. "You don't belong here," he shouted at the figure, recalling the pain and sorrow of the family it had tormented. "Let them go. They've suffered enough." The dark figure shrieked, the sound piercing and disorienting. The kitchen lights flickered violently as Jamie stood his ground, Clara's ethereal form by his side. "I believe in you," he said, his voice steady despite the terror swirling around him. "You can be free." As he spoke, a light began to emanate from Clara, growing brighter until it enveloped the room. The dark figure writhed in agony, shadows swirling in a chaotic dance. Jamie felt the house shake beneath him, a battle of wills playing out before his eyes. With one final scream, the darkness imploded, and the room fell silent. The warmth of Clara's spirit wrapped around him, and he could feel the weight of the house lifting. "Thank you," Clara's voice echoed softly, filling the air with a sense of peace. "You have freed us." As the light faded, Jamie found himself standing alone in the kitchen, the remnants of the battle lingering in the air. The table, once filled with ghostly offerings, now sat bare, but the atmosphere felt lighter, the shadows no longer threatening. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jamie returned to the living room. He opened his laptop and began to write, not just about the family and their struggles, but about his own journey, how he had faced his fears and discovered the power of compassion. In the weeks that followed, Jamie continued to return to Willow House. Each time, the house felt more like a home, filled with the whispers of gratitude rather than despair. He forged a bond with Clara's spirit, who seemed to guide him in his writing, inspiring him to share their story with the world. Back at college, Jamie poured his heart into the book, weaving together fiction and the truth of Clara's family. When it was finally published, he held a book signing in town, where he shared not just the story but the message of healing and understanding. The townsfolk gathered, intrigued by the tales of Willow House, and as Jamie spoke, he could feel Clara's presence beside him, encouraging him. He felt connected to the community in a way he had never anticipated, their shared history intertwined. As the sun set over Hollow Creek, casting golden light across the landscape, Jamie knew that the journey wasn't over. Willow House had become more than just a haunted relic. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in darkness, light could prevail. With each passing day, Jamie felt Clara's spirit guiding him further, nudging him to explore the depths of his own heart, leading him to uncover the stories still waiting to be told. And as he looked ahead, he understood that the echoes of Willow House would forever resonate within him, guiding him toward new beginnings and deeper connections. As weeks turned into months, Jamie continued to write, his life intertwined with the legacy of Clara and her family. Each visit to Willow House felt like a homecoming, a sacred space where he could commune with their spirits. The book he wrote became a local sensation, drawing visitors to the town who were curious about the haunted house and its history. During one of his visits, Jamie decided to dig deeper into the family's past. He found an old trunk in the attic, covered in dust and cobwebs. With a sense of reverence, he pried it open. Inside were letters, photographs, and mementos from the family's life Christmas cards, birthday invitations, and even Clara's old doll. Each item told a story, adding layers to the narrative he was crafting. As he sifted through the items, Jamie felt a connection to Clara grow stronger. The weight of her experiences resonated within him, stirring emotions he had never fully acknowledged. He realized he was not just telling a story. He was preserving their memory, allowing their voices to echo through time. One crisp autumn evening, Jamie sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea warming his hands, when he noticed something unusual, a flicker of light in the hallway. Curious, he set down his mug and moved toward it. As he approached, he felt a sudden chill, and the whispers began again, more insistent this time. Jamie. He turned to see a figure materializing from the shadows. It was Clara, but she appeared older, more defined, her expression grave yet kind. "We need to talk," she said softly. Heart racing, Jamie nodded, instinctively sensing the importance of this moment. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you don't know," Clara replied, her eyes shining with urgency. The dark figure, it wasn't just a spirit trapped in the house. It's part of something bigger, something that threatens not only us but others who seek to uncover our story. Jamie's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Clara glanced around, as if checking for unseen watchers. The figure was a manifestation of the family's pain, but it's also a guardian of the secrets buried here. It feeds on fear and despair. It has lingered for generations, preventing others from discovering the truth. "What truth?" Jamie pressed, the gravity of her words sinking in. "It's about the curse," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The curse that befell my family. It stems from an ancient wrong, a betrayal that dates back to the founding of this town. We were never just a family. We were protectors of a secret, one that must be revealed if we are to break the cycle of suffering." Jamie felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. "How can we break it?" Clara's expression softened. "By telling our story. But you must be careful. The figure will try to stop you. It feeds on doubt and fear. You have to confront it, not just for us, but for those who come after you." As Clara faded back into the shadows, Jamie felt a mixture of excitement and dread. The task ahead was daunting, but he couldn't turn away now. He had a responsibility, not only to Clara but to everyone who had suffered because of this dark force. Determined, he returned to his writing, pouring all his energy into uncovering the truth. He researched the town's history, interviewing locals, and piecing together fragmented tales of betrayal and sorrow. Each revelation fueled his resolve, but the dark figure was never far from his thoughts, lurking in the corners of his mind like a specter. That night, As he prepared for bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The air in his dorm felt heavy, as if the shadows themselves were waiting. Jamie knew he was crossing a threshold, one that might unleash forces he could barely comprehend. The following weekend, he returned to Willow House, his heart pounding as he crossed the threshold. This time, he felt an electric energy in the air, a tension that hinted at the storm brewing within the walls. As he settled at the kitchen table, he lit a candle, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows. "Show yourself," Jamie called, his voice steady despite the fear creeping in. "I know you're here." The room grew colder, and the dark figure emerged, swirling from the shadows. Its presence was palpable, an oppressive weight that pressed down on Jamie. "You shouldn't have come back," it growled, its voice a low rumble. "You will regret this." "I won't be afraid of you," Jamie replied, finding strength in Clara's words. "You can't silence the truth any longer." "I will tell their story." The figure recoiled, a surge of anger radiating from it. "You think you can uncover what was meant to stay buried? You will unleash a darkness beyond your understanding." "I will take that risk," Jamie shouted, feeling the energy around him shift. "Clara and her family deserve to be remembered, to be freed from your grasp." As if in response, the house trembled. The shadows deepened, and a cacophony of whispers filled the air, a chaotic symphony of voices fearful, angry, and filled with pain. Jamie felt the ground beneath him shift as memories surged, swirling in a whirlwind of despair. "Enough!" the figure roared, reaching out toward him. But Jamie stood firm, anchoring himself in the truth he had uncovered. "You're not the only one with power here," he declared. With every ounce of courage, Jamie called upon the memories of Clara and her family, the love they had shared, the laughter that had once filled these rooms. The shadows flickered, struggling against the light of their collective joy. "Clara, help me," he shouted, feeling her presence beside him once more. Together, in that moment, the light began to swell, illuminating the dark corners of the house. The whispers transformed into a chorus of voices, rising against the figure that had tormented them for so long. "We will not be silenced." Clara's voice rang clear, filled with strength and resolve. The dark figure writhed in agony, its form destabilizing as the light pressed in from all sides. "No, you cannot do this," it shrieked, desperation lacing its voice. But Jamie felt an overwhelming sense of clarity wash over him. He realized that the darkness was not just an entity. It was the embodiment of the pain and fear that had plagued Clara's family. To truly confront it, he had to acknowledge that pain, to give it a voice. "We understand your suffering," he cried, channeling Clara's spirit. "But you cannot control us anymore. We choose to remember love over fear." The light intensified, the shadows receding in its wake. The dark figure began to dissipate, its form unraveling like smoke. The room shook, and Jamie could feel the energy shifting as the spirits of the family surged around him, uniting in their shared purpose. With one final cry, the darkness collapsed in on itself, imploding into a swirl of energy before bursting forth as a brilliant light. When the light faded, Jamie found himself standing alone in the kitchen, the air still and peaceful. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As he looked around, he realized that the house had transformed. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and sunlight poured in through the windows, illuminating the space in warm, golden hues. Clara appeared, her expression one of joy and gratitude. "You did it, Jamie," she said, her voice radiant. "You freed us." Feeling tears prick his eyes, Jamie nodded, overwhelmed by the weight of what they had achieved together. "I couldn't have done it without you." Clara smiled. "Now you can truly tell our story. The truth will live on, and so will we." With renewed purpose, Jamie set to work, crafting the final chapters of his book. He wove together the family's history, the pain of their past, and the strength of their love. It became not just a tale of ghosts but a celebration of resilience and hope. As the book neared publication, Jamie felt a profound connection to Willow House. It was no longer just a haunted relic. It was a sanctuary of stories, a testament to the power of love and remembrance. He envisioned a future where the house would serve as a place for others to share their stories, a community gathering space to honor the past and embrace healing. As he looked out the window, watching the leaves dance in the breeze, Jamie knew that Clara's spirit would always be with him, guiding him forward. And as he typed the final words of his manuscript, he felt a sense of fulfillment knowing that their story would echo through time, a light shining in the darkness for all who dared to listen. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.